Hey folks, Don Lasagna here with another lazily edited video. I'm thinking that my other video on video game refunds will be a bit better edited, but for now I'm liking the fact that I can just push these videos out without really worrying too much about editing and making sure everything looks just right. But anyway, let's yell about Kotaku, the internet's favorite pastime. So there's a Kotaku situation as genuinely one of the most interesting gaming news stories I've seen in a while. Not in the article itself, but the reactions to it. Let's talk about it. First, a recap without any of my opinions at all. So writer Luke Plunkett wrote an article about the announcement / soft launch of a mobile XCOM game. Its title was 2K very quietly launches a new XCOM game that looks like shit. This title was later changed to 2K launch XCOM game that looks nothing like XCOM. Again, we're not doing my thoughts on the stuff yet. I'll link the full article down below, but to sum it up, they did not really like the look of the game. Again, this is a mobile game, and for a mainstream gaming publication, this is not really surprising. However, they do mention why they don't like the look of the game. They are a passionate fan of the franchise, and they mention how they don't really like the changing graphic style, they don't like the simplistic gameplay, it's nothing like the old games but still uses the same IP, and they predict the game will likely have scummy microtransactions. Put it all together and you have a bad game that is using the leverage of an existing IP to make a product the writer thinks is both exploitative and an insult to the entire franchise. So that's it. And everyone lost their minds. Go search Kotaku on Twitter and you'll see post after post about literally this one article. As someone who follows a lot of gaming stuff, I can't really escape the conversations around this, which is why I kind of wanted to make a video on it anyway. Because I'm already reading so much about it, I may as well just put something out there. Honestly, the reactions to this are so mixed that it really brings up a lot of interesting concepts that have kind of been swimming at the heart of discussions in the gaming industry for a while now. Some of which I've already talked about, but others that I haven't. So many people have been criticizing this article for being quote unquote unprofessional, saying things like, you can't criticize this game in this way. You can criticize the game generally, but to say a game looks like shit in a blunt way is bad and looks bad because people worked hard on it and it's mean. Other people in this group have used language like, the devs have put labor into this and deserve respect. And a few have even suggested that a lot of the mobile backlash comes from misogyny since more girls play mobile games. These are all things that I'll offer feedback on later, but for now, let's go ahead and continue to another corner. You have people who are applauding Kotaku for finally pushing back against publishers in a blunt way. These people like the article and like the fact that they used very specific, very negative language to describe something that they don't like. So what do I think? Well, this might not be a surprise to a lot of you, but I'm more pro this article than I am against it. Here's why. First, it's important to discuss what problems people have with mobile titles in general. It's not anything relating to gender norms, I can tell you that right now. Mobile titles haven't been girl gamer central, quote unquote, in like a decade. People play Fortnite on their phones now. What people are typically mad about with mobile is twofold. The first is that the monetization in these titles are often very, very scummy. Objectively speaking, mobile titles are far more tied to their freemium economies than most AAA titles are. Even the live service AAA games don't really compare to a lot of what you'll find in mobile titles. These economies are also far more prevalent in mobile titles overall, especially mobile spin-offs of existing franchises. And nearly all of them are designed to exploit people, designed to make the game less fun at certain intervals to milk money out of you. If you were a casual mobile gamer, you'd have more trouble finding a game without this garbage than you would with them. And trust me, I know because I've been that casual mobile gamer, trying to look around and see what the fuss is all about, and then all I got was scummy game after scummy game. Many are mad at their favorite franchises being a part of this out of principle, but I think the second source of anger is actually stronger, and it's fear. Fear in the knowledge that these gacha mechanics work really, really well, because of just general human psychology. And there's a huge temptation to put these mechanics into the mainline games of the series, or to not even have mainline games anymore at all and just focus on mobile. And then maybe eventually we'll have to deal with this with another franchise that we love because it's just too profitable. And this is not an irrational fear. We've seen all three of these play out on multiple series. I think you'd be hard-pressed to counter any of these concerns given the avalanche of knowledge at play here. Even the most level-headed defenders of this can't really back up defending the monetization stigma that mobile titles have. I'll link a second Twitter thread by someone named Damion Schubert. This is someone who makes these games for a living, and for what it's worth, I think he does a good job showing the other side of the situation in some ways, and even debunking some of the claims of the article. He discusses how the game being more accessible isn't just to appeal to the mobile audience, but also because of the control schemes more complicated systems require not being very comfortable on an Android. He discusses the concept of soft launches, only launching in limited windows and limited territories, and how this can be a really good thing for certain titles. It gets into why using the XCOM license could make a weird kind of sense for this kind of title. Many XCOM fans are now aging out of playing games as much or as seriously as they once did, and are thus more likely to be casual gamers, so a phone version of XCOM is something they are more likely to pay attention to. They even have a good rationale for why the characters look more cartoony. Generic soldiers are tougher cells as cosmetics than vibrant, easy to identify, colorful characters. It's an interesting article, and then he addresses the criticism of mobile freemium economies with the words, "fuck off." It's actually a really interesting heel turn. They address the fear of metrics is overblown more often than not, but they never really counter the core idea in this article and at the heart of why people don't like mobile games. That these games are, from a design perspective, made to pressure you into spending money. And that is worth calling out in as blunt of a way as possible. Now I will say, if the goal is to call out publishers for their scumminess, and only for that scumminess, a better title probably would have been something like 2K turns XCOM into gacha garbage, which not only centers what is being complained about, but is also catchier in my opinion. That being said, the article is not just complaining about monetization, but is also complaining about the game just not looking great. And I think the largest pushback against this article is just people not wanting others to quote-unquote be mean to developers by saying their game sucks. Well, I don't know what to tell you. You're in an industry where publishers are known for the most short-sighted, greedy antics in all media platforms. An industry where most of the time a game is bad, it's the result of a publisher realizing they can compromise X amount of quality or X amount of dev time and still not lose sales. It's an industry where game quality is subjective in some instances, but can also be objectively measured in performance, in the fidelity of graphics, and how much of the game is compromised to fit those microtransactions, etc. so forth. It's an industry that repeatedly lies and manipulates to its customers at a scale that other industries couldn't even dream of. But this is shockingly common amongst publishers. Game journalists have been speaking in polite voices to publishers for years about a lot of their aggressive monetization policies, in some cases defending them, and surprise, surprise, nothing's happened. The only time change has ever really happened in this industry is with massive, angry Reddit threads. Publishers do not understand nice. They understand brand damage. They understand bad PR. And a bunch of negativity being thrown at a brand is the quickest way to force a publisher into giving a shit. I understand it upsetting the people in the trenches making the game, but the alternative is to politely finger wag while these publishers chew and spit out all of the creativity in our industry in a sea of bad. This is especially true of the people who try to argue that the tone policing of an article's title is about respecting the labor of game development. Like, these people are trying to make this one dude on this one site saying a game looks like shit into some like quest for bread where the poor peasant developers are toiling away in the salt mines while us gamers are feasting on grapes and ivory towers. It's honestly kind of ridiculous. The reality is that wages have been stagnant for decades, so $60 is a lot of money for people, especially when you factor in the 1-2 punch of false advertising and shitty refund policies that most of these storefronts suffer from. Even with free games, the microtransactions can pile up if you're someone vulnerable to gambling. which, make no mistake, is the market these titles depend on to thrive. Developers may have their feelings on the line, and sure, I get that watching something you worked hard on get shat on is difficult. However, not only do players have to deal with negative feelings, they have to deal with their hard-earned cash being wasted on products not worth their time, and products they can't return. Products that take a franchise that they love and turn them into money machines. And worse than that, when they don't get angry, stuff just gets worse in the industry overall. Backlash was the only thing stopping loot boxes from being in anything other than mobile games and FIFA. Anger is a requirement for our industry not to take what we love and throw it into the dumpster. I get having sympathy for the developers, but I feel like this sympathy is often a smoke grenade used to hide the shady actions of publishers. Because most of the people pushing back on this article aren't throwing in a blame the publishers for the microtransactions because they're bad and continually plague our industry. It's not threads and threads of people saying, this is the real reason why a lot of games are bad, and listing all the things that publishers can do to mismanage the projects. These posters are beginning and ending with, stop being mean to the developers. It creates the sense that most of the people who defend companies against things players don't like see this as some zero-sum game between these valiant developer warriors and an army of gamer chuds storming the gate. I think many of these people just assume that everything that they see as quote-unquote chud adjacent is just inherently bad with no nuance whatsoever. And for normal posters, I can kind of understand that, but for people in our industry, it's just really sad. Or maybe they've just internalized the unspoken social rules of game industry Twitter. I don't know, like where you can only criticize certain things in the game industry, like crunch, but you can't criticize other things like monetization or being predatory on people that have gambling addictions or anything else. Either way, they may push back against people complaining about the publisher's stuff, but they don't really push back against the publisher's stuff. They'll push back against people complaining about the bad thing without realizing or caring about how the publisher is often the one responsible and is also doing some shady stuff. And they'll say, oh yes, we can clearly have a discussion about that. And then you'll say, okay, sure, you know, so here's what we don't like about it. And then they won't respond because they're not really interested in having that conversation. They're interested in saying that we can have that conversation, but they're never going to talk about it. They're never going to like the tweet. They're never going to retweet it. They're never going to really have that conversation. They're just going to say it's a worthwhile conversation to have and then not have it. And for a lot of them, it's because they're in the industry. They're trying to get hired and, well, it doesn't look good to criticize the publisher that's going to hire you. That's the only thing I can think of. The alternative is that these people just genuinely don't care about our industry being overrun by just greedy publishers. I'm trying to be charitable and assuming it's about being hired, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just genuinely don't care or just don't realize what they're doing is wrong. Either way, I just don't see a lot of them saying things like, you know, don't push back against game developers this way, push back against them this way, or push back against the publishers, or etc. so forth. I have to assume that the only reason that they're not doing it is because they're trying to get hired, they don't care, they don't like their friends being yelled at in the industry, or they don't like that the people that are complaining are often perceived as being entirely this toxic group of gamer chuds or whatever, and so they don't want to like give them the satisfaction of a win, even if it would make the industry better for everyone. And it's just this lack of nuance in the leadership overall that I just really I'm just getting so sick and tired of seeing. So yeah, they don't really push back against the publishers. They just throw up their hands and say, stop being mean, ooh, with no other points being made. And it's just really sad and annoying. And I've seen this for like a decade now, and it's just getting old. Also, aside from that one tweet thread that I linked, I'm not going to really put up a lot of others. I only put up that one tweet thread because I mostly agree with it and feel like, you know, if you agree with me, you would mostly agree with that thread as well. You know, I still want to point out my disagreements, but I do think that it's a nice piece of context that a lot of people don't have. So I linked it below. But Any of the other tweets that I'm talking about more generally that I just entirely don't like, I'm not going to link those because I don't want to do any editing and also don't want to have a bunch of people harass them in my name or whatever if it ever came to that. But anyway, overall my opinion is this. I'd rather someone call a game with bad microtransactions shit than to just casually report on the game like it's no big deal that these games are exploitative and just overall garbage. Heck, even if you're a developer, in the long run, outrage helps. Do you want to be making products that exploit people? Because I'm operating under the assumption that this is all the publisher's fault. If that's correct, then raging against these games is the only way to force publishers to hold off on inserting these elements into your game. The market is the one with the most power, so if you want this stuff to stop fighting the market and let it do its job. Let it help both of us and force the Bobby Koticks of the world to see gaming as the creative space it is, and not just a cash grab. Overall, this is going to be a really rambly video, not a lot of structure. I just kind of like vomited out everything that I was going to say without really trying to organize it very much. I may have repeated myself a few times. A lot of it was unscripted, so apologies. Hopefully this isn't too bad of a video, especially with the sound quality of my room still not being the best. I am working on it, but let me know if you agree with me, disagree with me, whatever. Maybe I'll do these more often if they get a decent response. Like, subscribe, you know, all this stuff. They say it helps, so I'm gonna say it, and yeah. Bye.